Well, greetings and welcome once again to Passion for the Paranormal, bringing a passion for the paranormal to you. I'm your host, Curry Stegan, and it's so wonderful to be back here with you once again for another great episode, and really excited to have Ted VanSon joining me on the show tonight. Ted has been researching and investigating the paranormal for over 30 years now. He has 2 books to his name. And he was also featured on a couple of the paranormal shows, to include Paranormal Survivor, and on a recent episode of Jason Hawes' new show, Ghost Nation. So very excited to have Ted on to be able to pick his brain about his experiences in investigating the paranormal. If you have not been over to the website yet, please pay us a visit there at passion4theparanormal.com. And there you can catch up with some past episodes. You can sign up for the Passion for the Paranormal newsletter. And you can also check out some cool Passion for the Paranormal merchandise. So I hope you'll visit the website. And also make sure to follow us if you're on Facebook at facebook.com/passion4theparanormal. And like and follow us there. And if you think of a friend, family member, a coworker you think that would like to tune into the show, please go ahead and share a link with them, and make sure you hit that subscribe button to whatever podcast app you're listening to or using. We are pretty much on all of them. So without further ado, I'm really excited to get into the discussion with Ted. I really hope you enjoy tonight's episode, and thank you for tuning in. Okay, so my guest tonight is Ted VanSon. And Ted has been investigating the paranormal for over 30 years now and has a skeptical belief in the paranormal. He is the founder and lead of Genesee Valley Paranormal and has appeared on Paranormal Survivor and Jason Hawes' new show, Ghost Nation. Ted is also the radio and podcast host of Paratalk Radio and an author and speaker. He co-authored the book Flashlight, Recorder, and Comfortable Shoes, and is author of Think Outside the Paranormal Box. Ted is joining me tonight to talk about his many years of investigating the paranormal and about his experiences. Ted, thank you so much for joining me on the show tonight.
Oh, you're very welcome. You're very welcome.
Oh, it's great to have you on the show, Ted. Many years of paranormal investigating, so this is going to be great to get into this discussion with you. But before, I hit you up with the questions and whatnot, maybe if you could take us back over 30 years ago to really what led you into the paranormal and to investigating
it. Oh, yeah. I can't believe it's been that long. But basically, when I was a child, my grandmother came to me one night while I was sleeping. I thought it was just a typical night, and it wasn't. She actually had passed away the afternoon before, and I didn't know that. And ever since that, I was intrigued, And then I started noticing other things, and then people would tell me their ghost stories, It just kept going after that. It was weird, but I was so intrigued with all this. How can somebody that's dead come and talk to me?
Yeah, absolutely. You and me both. So at what age did you say was that first experience that you had?
I think I was 7 or 8.
Okay, and now was this kind of a frightening experience for you, that first experience? Was it more of a...
No, because it was like, she normally, when we spent the night there, she normally put us to bed, and she'd come and kiss us on the forehead and say, "I love you, good night, see you in the morning." So it was normal. And the only thing that was different was that I was, already in bed. But if we went to bed early, she had the habit of coming up and just kissing us on the forehead, said, "See you tomorrow, love you," stuff like that. And I thought it was typical. I thought it was a normal thing. So the next morning, I asked where she was, and my parents were like, "Honey, she died yesterday afternoon."
Wow.
I'm like, how is that possible? At 7 or 8 years old, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, wait a minute. How can that be? She just kissed me goodnight last night.
Wow. That's amazing. Now, Ted, did you have any follow-on paranormal experiences as a child, as a teenager after that?
Well, yeah. I mean, getting together with family and stuff, my grandmother wore this perfume that was undeniable. I mean, you knew the smell. I mean, it was it was called the Bird of Paradise, and I don't remember who made it, but it had this unique smell. And every time the family, I can't say every time the family, but when the family got together, there were times where, you would be all together inside the house, doing something, or even at a private establishment for, parties and stuff, you would smell her perfume. And I'd notice it, or somebody else would mention it. So it was all the experiences that I had as a child had to do with my grandmother. Had to be either her smell or her voice, or even just kind of that feeling. I guess that was the biggest thing with my grandmother. But I had that throughout my teen years too. And then when I got a little older, it was other things. But I kind of put myself in those positions because I was investigating. I was trying to figure out why all this stuff happened. So some of my other experiences were just because I got involved.
Sure. Now, the interesting thing here is we're going back to the 80s now.
Oh
and
yeah.
this was a different time. You didn't have all these paranormal shows on TV, you didn't have all the equipment you have nowadays. What was it like getting started back then? How did you investigate back then versus how you do now?
Well, I want to start with one thing that's really changed is like back then in the late 70s and early 80s, it wasn't something you talked about. It wasn't something that you could just, I don't know, even with friends. I mean, you just couldn't talk about it, you know. Every time I said something, it's like, "Hey, I really want to go do this." It was like, you're not supposed to do that. We don't talk about this stuff. And and so it was tough there, but you go and you do your reading, and you try to find any stories in the library or any TV shows. You look for anything you can to get answers first off, of just a little bit of information. Thank God for In Search Of, and little shows like that. But when you start investigating, especially when you're young and you don't really know what you're doing, but you're guessing. I had one of those big flat, well, they weren't real flat, but they were the old fashioned cassette recorders, that you push the two buttons down and all that. So if I did anything, and they really weren't called EVPs to me because I didn't know that's what they were called, I just recorded stuff while I was out talking. I thought I was just talking to thin air and hoping that I would hear something in return. The other thing is it was a flashlight. You always took a flashlight. You had that big old recorder that you'd strap on the side or carry with your hand. The other thing was when we really started getting into investigating. There was strings with bells. There was, oh my gosh, there was just so many things. You had to be very inventive back then. You had to use your brain. It's not like today where you could just go buy whatever you wanted online. It was, now that I'm thinking about it, it was a lot of fun back then, and it was so different, just so different. And today, I'll be honest with you though, I don't use much more than that now. Flashlight, recorder, pretty much that's it. Maybe I have a couple little compasses that I use they were used for experiments, so they're very very sensitive to magnets as well, which they all are, but these are experimental ones, which are really cool. Yeah, that's what I did, and that's what I still do. I use some of the old stuff.
Yeah, that's cool. Now, using those old tape recorders that you just talked about, were you able to actually capture some interesting audio?
I did, but it wasn't like what we're catching today. Like I said, I didn't know what I was doing. If I heard a voice, I just kind of shrugged it off that it was somebody else that was walking near me or something. I was looking for things that actually answered my questions if I had questions. And, I guess there might have been a couple, and I'll be honest with you, I don't even have those things anymore. It's been so long ago. But yeah, that's one thing too when you're just when you're starting out, and it was way back when. You don't know that if you should be saving this stuff or not. And shelf life for a cassette tape is not that long. I think it's 20 years. Yeah, I don't think it's that long because the way the tapes are made, because it's magnetic. So, you have to be careful with that. And they were only 45 minutes long, I think, so you had to keep flipping the thing over.
Now, they're not as sensitive either as the recorders are nowadays, right? I mean,
No.
they wouldn't. I mean, you look at the frequency ranges on some of these recorders
Mm-hmm.
now, and they can go anywhere from 20 hertz all the way up to 20,000 kilohertz
Mm-hmm.
or more. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
guessing that technology back then with the tape recorders wasn't as sensitive. So, I've seen old shows, Hans Holzer, and, some of
Mm-hmm.
these real old school people using like reel to reel, you know, recorders and that sort of thing. But I mean, did you get to a point where you actually were capturing EVPs on these things?
Eventually, I ended up going to the small ones that you would use for, if you were going to like in college, when you'd have to take notes for your professor or your teacher speaking, I would get one of those little handheld ones. And so, yeah, then I would start using them. But you're absolutely correct that, back then they weren't as sensitive. Today, everything that we use is much more sensitive. So, with the hertz and everything else and where their range is, it's so different from mechanical to the new digital stuff, and I'm sure that I have stuff. I'll be honest with you, I that stuff is long packed away. I don't even know if they're any good. I didn't start really collecting and keeping real regular notes until probably the early 90s. That would be pushing it, but yeah, I mean, I've been doing it a long time, but we just, when you started doing this stuff and you had nobody else to talk to about it, you just did what you thought was right, you know? And
Sure.
so today you really start to collect and keep notes more so than yesteryear, I guess is the best way to put it.
Sure. Now, you talked also about, that you are a skeptic to a certain degree. Now, talk to me
Hmm.
about when you say skeptic, what does that really mean for you and the paranormal?
Well, what it means to me is I just don't take anybody's word for anything, and I just can't believe because somebody wants me to believe. I have to do my research on it. I try to do experiments. I really try to get to the bottom of it, look at all sides of it. I just don't take anybody's word. That's the biggest thing about it. If I don't have proof, if I don't have something that makes my mind go, "Wow, this is really really cool," then how can I expect anybody else to believe it? You know what I mean? I have to put my extra signature on it, is sort of say, you know. It's just I just can't accept anything for what people say. I have to have more. And I
Sure.
always say that. I gotta have more.
Sure. And that makes perfect sense. I mean, it sounds like, from what you're saying, you take an objective approach to it. Now,
Right.
some people, when they hear the word skeptical, they think, well, that person just doesn't believe in ghosts. They really are not a believer. So, and I think that some people are really not using it in the correct context, but because you're skeptical doesn't necessarily mean that you don't believe. I mean, is that a fair assumption? What I'm saying there, as far as
I would guess so. That's the way I'm taking it. Though I do have a friend that is very very skeptical, more so than I am. But I think especially in this community or field, whatever you want to call it, if you can't look beyond what's right in front of you, if you can't try to find answers, if you can't go a little deeper, then you're just accepting it. And I'm not willing to just do that. You know, I need a little more. I've always said it, and I always will say it. It's like when I investigate and and I try to give a client an answer or anybody else an answer, I look at it as hard and full, I guess is the best way to put it. I mean, I go through every steps that I can to make sure that what I'm seeing or hearing is fact, for me at least. And so I've been able to debunk a lot of things, but at the end of the day, when I have two piles, one is, okay, debunked, and the other one is I don't know pile, then, I have to say that some things are believable, some things aren't, but I will never just say yes automatically. I will even go back to that stuff a couple hundred times, throughout the years just to see what I can do or look for something that's similar to match them up. So being skeptical, I think, is at least willing to follow through, keep an open mind, but keep testing. And that's my assumption with skeptic, being somewhat like a skeptical believer, I guess is the best way to put it. But as just a plain believer, no, I can't just say I believe. I don't think I ever would.
Sure.
Not until I have proof.
Sure, and that certainly makes sense. Now, you go into a location, you investigate it. Talk to me about how you're preparing. What are you doing? Are you interviewing clients? Are you, doing some historical research?
Yeah.
How do you go about doing that?
Well, this is kind of, we have a process, and I actually found somebody else does the same thing, which is actually pretty cool. But my process is fairly to the letter, as I put it. A client calls or someone calls and they have a problem. What we do is get as much information from that person as possible. And we try to do our research on that person because sometimes you can't. It's hard. There's a lot of programs that you have to purchase. There's a lot of things, and if you have friends in high places and so on and so forth. Same with the location or where they claim this stuff is happening. So that's the first thing right off the bat is you do your research on the person and the location. You do as much research as possible. The location, you're doing it by the claims, like what they see. So you try to get their descriptions, you try to get whatever it is, what they see and hear, you want to get as much information about that for that location. So there's a lot of research before you even go to the location. Once you get to the location, you kind of go through the necessary steps with them again, just to make sure that all the information is correct that you were handed, to see if there was anything new. Then you do like a walkthrough. You kind of say, okay, can you show me where this is or what you heard or where, and so on and so forth. And you go through it. It's kind of a typical way that investigations are done. Then you want to do, some people go, oh, well, you got to do an EMF sweep. You've got to do, let me kind of go back. Like, yes, there are a lot of people, and I even started out that way with EMF sweeps, where you go in and you look at the location and you try to get an idea if there's any EMF in there and how this is affecting you or affecting the client. So typically you would start off with an EMF detector, try and get a basic reading, which means you want to go all four directions. We do something where we do it every 3 feet. We try to take a reading to see if that reading every 3 feet is different. And the reason we do that is because sometimes with wiring and for like the furnace and so on and so forth, it's going to be stronger when you're hitting that area if it's right underneath the floor or in the wall. So if we do it by threes, it's easier for like 3 feet. It's easier for us to count, to put the feet with it, as well as what the EMF is, that that digital number that's spiking with it. Sometimes, depending on the location and what we see, we change it up a little bit, and we don't do an EV or EMF spike test. What we do is we just go in and we set up the cameras, and we go back downstairs, wherever the location is. We go back with the client. We just let the cameras run. We talk with the client, let that happen for like what we call a short investigation to see if it warrants us coming back, sort of like a test, when you first meet the client. So our first meeting might be 6 hours. because we might just talk with the client, get all the basic, information, and then just set up the cameras, like I said, and let it play. If we catch something that kind of gives us a more important note, I guess, to say, okay, this is definite. This is what we got in our pre-investigation, I guess is the best way to say it. And then we'll make plans with the client. We will come back a second time, and what we do is we just put up all the cameras. They're left there for 24 hours. And we try to get the client not to be there, or any animals not to be there. So it'd be 24 hours of just cameras rolling. That's it. The next investigation would be a mixture of human interaction and cameras. And within those 2 or 3, because of the pre-investigation, anything that we catch or we think we caught, we kind of put that all together and say, okay, this is what we've got. Where do we go from here? Let's talk to the client, so on and so forth. Now, this is something that most people don't understand. With investigations, on an average, you might get a team that will go into a location and be there, 8 hours, 6 to 8 hours, and then they're done. Well, I've already told you that I'm doing 3 days right off the bat, pre-investigation and another investigation just with cameras, and then the third day would be investigation with cameras and people. I have spent anywhere from, I would say, 3 to 4 days to 3 years on one location. Wow. And that's because you just can't say in the first, investigation, a one-time thing, that this is what the problem is.
Sure. Now you mentioned that that's interesting approach, because I hadn't heard that before. So you set up cameras before actually physically going in and investigating. Now, are you guys going through all of that camera footage before?
Oh, yeah. You're talking 80 hours. You're talking, that's, let me tell you, brother, there's some days while you're listening and watching, you're just kind of end up snoring. Because people don't understand. It's very tedious. It's very boring. It's not the fun part of the job. Right. Unless you catch something, whether you see something, so you try to make notes as well when you're investigating and the cameras are rolling, so that you can go back to it. But when you just got one day of just cameras rolling, it's just a tedious job, and you hope that you get enough, members or people that will be involved to help you go through it all.
Yeah, I was going to say that is time intensive, because I know, when I've done investigating, it's typically we're there at a location for a night. We've got recorders and cameras and such, and just trying to pour through that, both audio and video, could take me weeks to get through, and so I can.
Yeah.
That would that would seem very time intensive to do that. So are you not getting? Are there times when you're going through that video where you're not back with the client for weeks, or? What timeline are we talking about just to get through the video?
Okay, so basically I would talk to the client and say, okay, this is how this is going. The initial we went through, because that's normally the pre-investigation, we usually write that night. We go through it, because you're excited. You want to know what's going on. So you go through that, so that's done. Your second night with just cameras rolling, pretty much we make sure that the client knows that it's going to be a few days. And what we try to do is have that done within 3 days. Well, that means that if I'm investigating that place, I know, let's say a week from today, that means I have 7 days to get this done before the next investigation, if it warrants it. That's sort of how we look at it. If we don't hear or see anything from what we've already recorded, we say to them, okay, if it's something we think is important, we'll try to, especially like within the first maybe few hours of looking at tape and hearing and listening, if we definitely see there's something going on there, we will send that off to somebody else within the group and say, hey, you need to finish this. We're setting up the investigation for the next round. Let us know what you get. And then we set up that investigation within the day, say, okay, we're going to be coming back in a couple days, and the client will tell us yes or no, or it definitely happens a lot where they say, can you wait till next weekend so that I can blah, blah, blah. So it may be a week in between, but it gives us enough time to go through all that stuff. But you get excited about it, or you get disappointed because you caught absolutely nothing. But at least with that, you're knowing that it's not, I don't know, I guess the best way to put it is it's not, nothing is pointing towards it actually being haunted. It's especially when you've caught nothing. Hey, we know that ghosts do not come out on command, whether we set up our cameras or not. Most of the time, it's up to the client, and we actually help them to do their own investigations when we're not there. We'll tell them what they could do to catch the stuff. So any investigation, like right from the get-go, could take anyway from a day to 7 to 14 days. This is not a quick process,
Sure.
and it shouldn't be, because you're there to help a client. You should be working on this and taking as long as you need. And while you're doing that, be in constant contact with your client,
Sure. Now, has most of the investigating you've been doing over the many years you've been doing it, has it primarily been involved in residential hauntings?
It's 99.9% is residential.
Okay, that's interesting, because a lot of the investigating I've done is been in abandoned buildings and commercial buildings, businesses, and just a few residential. So I'd say mine's been pretty much the opposite of that. It's been pretty much
I did that when I was 15, 16. I don't do that stuff anymore, and I don't pay to do investigations either. Meaning I don't go to some of these places that are looking to, and I understand why they do it. They're trying to raise money to keep their buildings open and stuff like that, but I don't pay to do it. Our team does it for residential. We're here to help a client, and we just do the best we can. We don't, and here's something that I should say, is we never tell a client that their house is haunted. Never, ever, ever. We always tell them we've caught something, we're not sure what it is. Here's our advice to help us understand this as well, and work with us until we can figure it out. And if we never figure it out, then I unfortunately at that point we will keep doing our experiments, or we will keep trying to help until they say I'm done, or we have to pass it off to somebody else. Just because I've been doing it for 30 years doesn't mean I have the most information or knowledge. So there's always somebody out there that knows more than I do. Just it's a fact in this field that we continue to learn every single day. There is no one expert in the field. Not one person has all the knowledge. And so for me, and what I tell my people or other investigators and other teams, if it's something over your head, pass it on to somebody else. Get the help, call somebody else in. If you can't, and they can't figure it out, then do what I do. Tell your client, this is going to be a long process. We will help you as much as possible. We'll help you until you say, there's nothing else we can do. You just don't leave your client hanging, but you follow through as much as possible until the client says, I'm satisfied, or, okay, this is a long haul. Are you with me? That's it.
I was just about to say, do you have some clients that they want answers right away, and they're not willing to be patient through that process that you work through?
Oh yeah, I've talked to clients to where they've insisted they have a demon in their house because another team told them that. The team was there for 4 hours. They used a ghost box, and the ghost box said there was a demon. The client had said to me, I need answers now. Can you come to my house now? And I said, I can't come to your house now. So they got real upset with me, started yelling at me on the phone. And so I made plans to go, like, within the next couple days. I get over there, and I'm trying to help them out. And they are very emotional people, I guess, is the best way to put it. And by the time I was done within just the initial walkthrough and doing a little bit of recording while I was there, they wanted answers right then and there. And I told them point blank, I can't give you any answers on this as a definite. There are no definite answers. Sure. And I got it back thrown in my face. Well, this other team told me it was a demon. What do you mean? You've been doing this longer than them. You don't have any answers? I'm like, you have to understand that the other team that gave you these answers isn't doing the research like I'm doing. They are just, unfortunately, they kind of just use you for the investigation and then dumped you. And that's very hard to say to a client, because then they get really upset.
Right. And they're very emotionally, obviously, tied into it, and
Oh yeah.
have already
Yeah,
made their mind
because
up. Of course, I think these people you're talking about have probably already made their mind up that
that
there's
there was. Yeah. They made up their mind that they were going to believe the other team, that yes, there was a demon there, and they were going to sell their house.
yeah, and that must be difficult. Again, I haven't worked with a lot of residential clients. I've only done a handful of them. I wanted to ask you, because you covered in the book, you talk about using things around the house where you don't have to use a lot of expensive equipment. Talk a little bit about things that, just ordinary things that you can get in the house you can use to help you in an investigation.
I get these questions a lot about my book because Think Outside the Paranormal Box was just my way of trying to give to the community to start thinking, outside their norm. And some of these ideas were what I was trying to do back in my teens when I was investigating, because we had no tools. But if you watched movies, if you talked to people that had their experiences, their stories, they would tell you that a spoon just kind of like popped off the counter, or it sat there and it spun. So you would take some of their stories and you would try to come up with tools from their stories. So I basically just said, okay, let's think outside the box here. If I was a ghost and I was throwing this stuff around, or how would this affect me, or what could I do? What would move? I just started thinking and jotting these things down and said, okay, let's do something that other people do, but take it out of their hands. So what I'm saying there is, let's try, I don't know, a pendulum. Instead of the pendulum being in somebody's hand while they're holding it, let's put it on a banana hook, or a banana holder, and let's let the holder hold it instead of us, because we know the electrical impulses in our hand definitely would move that pendulum. So because we cannot keep our hands perfectly, our arms perfectly still without any movement, plus the electrical impulses. If you put it on a hook on a stand, then you're taking the human interaction out of it. Same with your rods. Instead of holding on to your rods, put them in some styrofoam, like that you put your fake flowers in, that green foam. Put them in that. Super glue that, or Elmer glue that to a piece of 2x4. Stick them in there. If these things are supposed to interact with ghosts or spirits, then I don't need to hold on to them. See, this is the skeptical side as well as the believable side. You know what I mean? So let's just take them out of the hands of the humans. And if they're really going to react, if a ghost is really going to move those things, then it's going to do it without me holding them.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was just going to bring up the dowsing rods, when you were talking about using the pendulum, because that I've heard that before. I've never used them in that way, and in fact, I've never really used them very often, just on a few occasions. But that certainly makes sense, kind of taking the human element out of it. Our tendency to have some sort of impact, influence on the rods or whatever we're using. It certainly makes sense.
It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be, and this is something that I try to tell people as well. Everybody goes out and spends $500 on a ghost box. Why? There's no reason for it. There's just I've heard how many stories over the years where somebody says that, my pen crawled across the floor, or crawled across the counter. So you take a pen and you put it on the counter and use it as a tool. You take a ball, you put it on the counter and use it as a tool. Sure, there are some things that you need to do, let's say like a balloon, which is one of your older experimental tools, where you have to make sure there's no air movement or breeze in that room wherever you stick that balloon, because it's so light, it's going to be you're able to move it so delicate, like anything, blow on it, it moves. I mean, it's the lightest thing that you can put in there besides a feather to use as a tool. So you want to make sure there's no breezes, there's no fan running, there's no furnace running, the register isn't anywhere near it. It's not, you can have no leaks in the window. If you can do all that, and even if you have to use painter's tape and get permission from the owner to tape it up where there's no airflow and just stick a camera in there, then that's what you have to do,
Sure. Yeah, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, you appeared on Ghost Nation, Jason Hawes' new show. You got an opportunity to work with Jason, Steve, and Dave, and of all the paranormal shows I've watched, Ghost Hunters was really one that I thought was the most credible. Granted, it's still a show; they still have to get ratings. Talk to me about what it was like working with those three, with Jason, Steve, and Dave.
Well, I've known Jason for a long time. He's actually from my area. Jason is a great guy when he investigates. He's kind of a no nonsense kind of guy. He just doesn't throw that supernatural feel in on anything. He really wants to know what's happening and why it's happening. And I believe Steve and Dave are the same way, and that's why they make a good team. We worked with them for a week just outside of Ithaca, and it was a fantastic time because we kind of had the same ideas as in ethics when it comes to investigating. Same ideas, and okay, I would do this, or in fact, we talked about it and we joked with each other. It's like, yeah, we've been doing that a long time. You're just stealing our stuff, Ted. I'm like, okay, yeah, and I think that was Steve that said it to me, and I'm just like, come on, guys, But it was fun to work with somebody else that does things just about the same way. They rely on what they catch through their equipment, which is basically video and audio. Very rarely do they use anything outside that. They will use some REM pod type things, but for the most part, it's audio video, and I would say that's a good 85% of it. And to me, that's the only way to go.
Sure. Sure, yeah, and I agree. 90% of what I've captured as an investigator has been through audio equipment. It's been through voice recorders.
And even though you get that stuff, there's still no proof that it actually existed. I mean, unless you're digging into some place to where there's records, it's kind of hard to say. And this is where it's going to lead us, to be honest with you, is we may never, ever, ever know if any of this stuff is real. We may never, ever really know. It's going to come down to either a belief or not a belief. And that's what it may come down to in the end,
Sure. Talk to me about, over this many years of paranormal investigating, there had to be some, oh crap moments. I was almost about to curse. I try not to do that on this show.
Yeah.
Just for the listeners, the shoot moments.
Oh poop. Oh,
right. Poop. Talk to me. You've had to have had some of those moments where
I've had a few. Some of them I don't really talk about because it was kind of one of those embarrassing things. And I was younger, of course. I did an investigation in a cemetery with some friends. And we were all supposed to be on the same note here, same pathway, same mindset. And this whole investigation, it was supposed to be fun as well. And it got a little too real, I guess is the best way to put it. And I can just tell you that the other three people I was with left me there by myself because they got scared really easily. So I was trying to do this by myself, and screech owls tend to just scare the poop out of you. You can, and especially when you've never, I've heard owls before, but screech owls, I was walking down the pathway center between these two rows, and this thing came out of nowhere, and it sounded like that it was like standing behind me, and it screeched, and I I'm telling you, I could have filled my pants at that moment. It scared me so bad. I dropped everything and ran, but knowing that I had to go back in there to get that stuff, I just left it, and it was embarrassed. I was embarrassed, even though there was all my friends had left me way before that. And, but I saw this after I saw that it was the owl. I tried to go back, but it was really weird that this owl landed right where my equipment was on the ground. And I'm like 16, 17 years old, standing in the middle of a cemetery. It's dark. It's weird. You hear coyotes and, all these noises, crickets, and everybody had left me. So I'm like looking at this bird where my equipment is, which simply was just, my little handheld mechanical recorder. And I think I also had, no, I thought maybe I had my compass with me, but I don't think I did. But whatever I had in my hands, I dropped. But I saw this bird sitting there in front of that stuff just screeching away, and there was no way I was going back while the bird was there. I decided, nope, I'm not going back. The bird can have it.
Now, I mean, have there been any moments, and I know, I haven't been doing paranormal investigating nearly as long as you have. I mean, have there ever been moments where there were full body apparitions, anything like that you witnessed?
Yeah. In fact, if you watch the episode with Ghost Nation, that's probably the most recent one. This thing just appeared out of nowhere and walked from one end of the room to the other, and it was very weird. I mean, it was kind of like snow collecting in one area or energy collecting in one area, and then this dark figure just kind of popped out of it and started walking. And while it was walking, it was creating more of a form of what it really was, and which to some of us looked like a woman with a bun, and the rest of it, some people instead looked like Count Dracula with a little, his collar pushed up. It was kind of a weird apparition, manifestation. It was the first of my kind of ever seeing something like that. I mean, I've seen shadows. I've seen what they would consider a doppelganger, which would be, like a family member or, like another person, but you thought that, you thought that person was with you, then you turn around, they're not, they're standing outside type of deal, so yeah, I've had some experiences, but ultimately, I couldn't prove it, that they actually existed. I put it up to where it was my mind. Was there spikes in any EMF? I mean, we did start out, I'm going to be honest with you, when you get members, some of them like the gadgets. So, it's like, okay, put down your K2, okay, use your REM pod or whatever. And it's fun to have a little light show. But, there's still no proving it. And I don't tell my members they can't use that stuff. That's up to them. I just tell them that what I'm looking at the end of the day, I need proof. I need more. But yeah, I've seen stuff. I've heard stuff.
Now, I mean, have you been touched, pushed?
Oh, yeah. I've been poked. I've been pushed. The first time it happened to me, I won't lie, it scared the hell out of me. And then I kind of shrugged it off for a second. Was like, there was nothing. And it never happened again.
And that
Hinsdale House in Hinsdale, New York. That was probably the third place, or maybe fourth location that ever physically touched me. And that was kind of like a poke in my, kidney area. It was like somebody was trying to get my attention. And it happened twice, but after that, I couldn't get it to reproduce it again.
And that's kind of the frustrating part of this is you have something that you feel like was significant that happened, but then try to get it to whatever did it to reproduce it, to recreate it, to get the activity to happen again is next to nil. It just doesn't seem to happen. And then you go for hours without anything happening sometimes. And that's the frustrating, that for me, that's been the frustrating part of the interesting things that happen, yet there's so much time in between there where absolutely nothing happens. you're trying to get responses from these spirits or ghosts, and you very seldom do. And I've always found that that's just kind of the strange nature of doing paranormal investigating is,
That's the way it goes. That's the way it goes. I mean, there are some locations that claim that it's haunted, and you get there, and I've gone back 3 or 4 times and got absolutely nothing.
Sure.
And and then I've asked other people, did you ever get anything? And like, oh yeah, I got an EVP. Can I listen to it? And I thought it was something totally different. I didn't consider it an EVP at all. It's strange, how all this comes down, and that's why I say we'll never ever have the answers when we want them. Ghosts don't come out on command. You might get one thing, and then it may just all quiet down and be dead for the rest of the night. You may not get anything at all. I mean, it's so hit and miss, and there's so many theories. And at the end of the day, I mean, even with me being touched and had some things myself, it's like psychologically you sit back and you reevaluate yourself. Did I really feel that? Or did I want to feel that, so my mind made me feel that?
Yeah, Ted, you just stole my thunder, because that has happened with me so many times.
Mm-hmm.
I got touched, I saw a shadow, and then it's almost like your mind is trying to talk yourself out of what you experienced later. Right. And that is something I've done on a number of occasions. I've had, strange experiences, and I've even had other people that seen them too, and I still try to talk myself out of what I had experienced. So yeah, I definitely understand exactly what you're talking about there. Sometimes I think it's human nature for us to go, well, did that really happen? Could that have really happened? Yeah, and it is one of the one of the challenging aspects of doing this, because your mind wants to make sense of it and come up with some rational explanation for what may have happened.
That's why I always say, Curry, that's why I always say, just don't accept what people say, or even what you think the first time. Always go back and look again. Go back and try and, debunk it some more, or run an experiment. Try and figure it out. Just don't accept it until you have no other choice but to accept it.
Sure. Now, I wanted to go back to when you were on the Ghost Nation episode, working with Dave and Steve and Jason. Now, they actually captured that apparition on camera, correct? Right. Yeah, so that one was quite interesting to me as well, because it looked like, I think like you said, it kind of looked like it almost had this, how do I explain it, almost kind of like this shadowing effect. Right. As it moved across the room, it looked like it was going from, one side of the room to the other, perhaps out a door. But yeah, I do remember that on the episode, and that was quite interesting. And did anybody actually see that with their own eyes, or was that just captured on?
It was just video. It was just video. And the thing is we had the opportunity to look at it close up, more so than what was on the TV, and so that figure actually started out as, like I said, it was developing, it was manifesting, and then it kind of changed form and came into this dark figure. And as it was walking, the figure it looked like something straight out of a science fiction movie. I was, my mouth dropped. I was drooling. I was like, are you kidding me? What am I watching here? What did you guys make up? This is what I was, guy, this is CGI, right? You guys did this. What is this? And it was one of those cameras that sends you an alert on your phone, and then you can watch it right from your phone. So, it was just an amazing piece of evidence, or if that's what you want to call it, it was something. And I have a hard time calling one thing evidence, but if you've got a whole handful of stuff or a cart full, then you can honestly say, hey, you definitely got something going on here. And that's what Jason and Steve and David told the gentleman, was that there's definitely something going on here. And at least you got some evidence, or some answer, that something was going on. And that's what I always liked about, Jason and his guys, is they'll always tell you straight, to your face, hey, I can't give you 100%, but this is what we caught, and we'll let you decide what you think.
Sure.
And that's pretty much how we do it too. We kind of all follow the same thing. And, being a part of Ghost Nation, because we are, anybody that's ever worked in the field is considered a part of the nation. And that's what I also like about Jason. He put this out there is that, hey, we're all in the same field, so we're all part of the same club. He's willing to work with anybody.
Sure.
And that's the way it should be.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about, and this is a little bit controversial. Well, first of all, anything that you've experienced that could even border in the demonic?
No. I knew you were going there.
I had to go there.
Absolutely not. I do not believe in demons. I do not believe that there's something so evil no. Let's just put it this way. Everything in life, every animal, and humans are animals, have a good side and a bad side. And that's about as evil as it gets. Your demon or demons or devil, that's a man-made creation. That's not nature. I guess the best way to put it.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on the fact that I've never experienced that. Now I haven't been doing investigating near as long as you, over 6 years myself, but nothing that I've ever experienced that would remotely come close to what somebody might call something demonic. And I've talked to a lot of other people, a lot of other investigators have said the same thing. So for the listeners out there, you watch some of these shows and, and I'm not going to name any types of shows or anything, and you see
I will on my show. I'll name them.
You'll call them out, won't you?
That's right.
Yeah. So, that's one of the reasons why I want to ask that is because I've had other investigators on the show who've been doing this a long time, who've kind of echoed the same thing you're saying. And, so, for the listeners there, this is not, there's not always a bunch of demonic activity going on out there. A lot of this stuff is just, maybe people do get pushed and touched, and maybe it's a spirit or a ghost trying to get their attention. That's what I always.
It doesn't mean it's evil. It doesn't mean that it's a demon.
Absolutely.
It doesn't, and that's all that stuff is put out there to scare people. You have to remember, like I said, it's man-made. It's there to scare people. It's not real. But we all have our own opinions, and I value their opinion as well as I hope they value mine.
Sure. Now, there's also the two different types of theories, if you will, about hauntings. There's the intelligent hauntings, and then
the residual.
The residual, yep. Yeah. And I wanted to ask you about the residual side. What are your thoughts on residual hauntings?
Well, some investigations that I have done, I would say classify as residual. Usually, most of them are residual. And that's because it's like a time loop, and it's just something that's played over and over and over, but doesn't mean it's going to happen every day. It doesn't mean it's going to happen every week. It's kind of like having a house that was built in the 1600s, and let's just say this woman hung herself, but she always had this habit of walking from the living room to the kitchen, and when she passed, or when she killed herself, or whatever the case may be, just so happens every time when the moon is full or the time is right, her image goes from the living room to the kitchen or the living room to the bedroom or wherever. It's just a time loop. It's not intelligent. Intelligent hauntings are more when they react to you actually being there. Your residual is just something that's like a time loop. It's just like a tape player or a movie playing over and over and over again. And that's what the majority of these things are, I believe. I don't think there's anything so intelligent that I've seen to a point where it can sit there and react with you and have a conversation. Yeah, I don't know anybody that can sit down and have a conversation. Oh, I have, I don't know. I have, dead Uncle Frank here sitting with me in the lazy boy chair. So don't sit there. And he's having a conversation with me. No. And I don't think so.
Here's what gets me though about the residual haunting theory. How do we know that this is just not a ghost or a spirit that had a specific routine when they were alive, They went down the stairs to do something at 5 o'clock every day. It's a routine that they had established in life, and maybe they're just going about that routine in death as well, in the afterlife. That's the
Right.
only thing I say about residual, and I have never, I know this is not a popular thing. Some people won't like me for saying this. I'm not sold on the residual haunting theory. I just kind of wanted to get your take on it. I do understand how people say that, perhaps it is just, a sound that happens, periodically that could just be, some sort of time loop. I just have not been firmly sold on that concept.
Well, being a skeptical believer, I'm not either. But at the end of the day, and they've seen this thing over 10 years, 5 times doing the same thing, that points to a residual thing. And I'm not sure what else to call it. It's not sitting there like Dead Uncle Frank having a conversation. It's something that appears to happen exactly the same over and over and over time, all the time. So if it's doing exactly the same thing at the same time, or however the case may be, that's the only time they see this person or this thing happening, then to me it's residual. I don't know what else you would call it.
Sure. And I wanted to, we're getting short on time here, but I did want to, because you've also done some researching and investigating of Sasquatch and Bigfoot cases in Upper New York area. Can you talk a little bit about doing some of that research and investigating?
Well, being a paranormal investigator means that I cover all fields. And that's the way I take it. That's personally my opinion. And you'll find that that is not the case in some of these other groups or people. They believe a paranormal investigator is just ghosts, and that's not true in my mind. I've had a couple of experiences. Most of the time, it's not something I've seen. It's only been things I've heard, like wood knocks or something running away. Bigfoot has been seen in my area here in New York, which is unbelievable for some people. It's in fact, there's if you want to call it an epicenter of New York, it would be Whitehall, New York. That's where most of the sightings are. But there's places for me within 20 minutes to a half hour, an hour. New York's not any different than any other state that has hills and mountains and forests that are protected, where this creature supposedly could live. Do I believe in Bigfoot? I'd like to, and that's my answer. But I do the research. I do the same thing there when it comes to my ghost hunting. I use my senses, my ability to write and to log things, to hear. A lot of listening equipment and using cameras. Same deal. Nothing special. Well, a baseball bat. So, but you have to learn. There are some other things that you should educate yourself with, like tracking, being able to distinguish footprints from different animals and creatures. You should do that. Also knowing the area that you're going into by what kind of animals are actually there. Because if you've never been there before, there could be rattlesnakes, so on and so forth. So try to educate yourself as much as possible. And that's what I'm going to kind of say to you when it comes to the paranormal. Get as much information and educate yourself every single day with this stuff. Remember, you're a sponge. Take it all in, because nobody has all the answers. Just keep learning. Just keep learning. That's all any of us can do.
Sure. And as we wrap up here, Ted, what other, because you just already mentioned a couple of them, what other suggestions or tips do you have for those who are interested in starting in the field or just getting started?
I had this question the other night, and I would say pretty much what I've just said. Educate yourself as much as possible. There are a ton of books. There are people that have been researching for a long time. There's people that have only been doing it for 5 to 10 years that have as much information as I do. Reach out to them. Try and get some information. But if your gut tells you something's funny, then go with your gut. Move on. I've had that. I've heard horror stories. But just try to educate yourself. You will come across somebody if you're really interested in, especially in joining a group. But education and knowing that you don't have all the answers is the right way to go about it, because there's always going to be somebody that knows a little bit more than you. And if something ever happens on one of these investigations and you think you know it all, but you have no answers, then you're kind of left there holding the bag. Education is probably the biggest things with me that I would say. Just keep educating yourself. You don't need all those gadgets. You don't need all that stuff. There's tools in your house you can use. And I don't know, buy some books. Read some, because reading is important.
And I guess enjoy the journey, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's not for everybody. There's a lot of tedious, there's a lot of hard, boring things to do. It's not a great job. Please don't charge anybody either. That would really kind of make me upset.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there. And I like that you touched on, nobody's an expert in this field. How can we be an expert about something we can't prove? How
can you be an expert of nothing? We can't prove that a ghost exists. It's not like we have DNA. It's not like we have some substantial proof that really are here. There's nothing tangible whatsoever. So just keep an open mind and do the best you can. Experiment as much as possible. Recreate what you see and hear as much as possible. That's it. We've talked about everything else.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just be smart about it. Use your common sense.
Now, Ted, if people want to find your books, other research or work you've done, where can they go?
That probably the easiest way, to be honest with you. There's three main outlets for me. One of them is my email, which is Ted, TED, GVPI@gmail.com. You can always send me an email. The other place would be a website, would be, which one? I think it's going to be the same. It's going to be gvpi.org. It's just the letters, GVPI, George Victor, Paul, Igloo.org. I'm also a host of Paratalk Radio through WLFE-DB Radio, so you can find me underneath paratalkradio.com. I have several pages on Facebook. I'm on Instagram, Twitter. I'm on all that stuff, so I'm pretty accessible.
Now, Ted, when does Paratalk Radio air again for the listeners?
Monday nights at 8 o'clock. So that's Eastern Standard Time. So Mondays at 8. And you can find it on Facebook, StreamYard, YouTube. It's also available on Spotify, iTunes, iHeart. It's on 9 or 10 other platforms. So wherever you listen to your podcast, you'll be able to find us.
Cool. Well, great. Hey, Ted, I really appreciate you joining me on the show tonight. And
hey, not a problem.
Maybe we can talk again down the road. There's so many things.
Sure.
We could talk for hours about some of this stuff. Unfortunately, we only have a limited amount of time. You got another show to do tonight. So once again, thank you for joining me, and have a great show tonight, and have a great night.
Thank you. You too. Always a pleasure.
Okay, so that about do it for tonight's show, and big thanks to Ted VanSon for joining me on the show. That was a great talk, and really hope you got some good information out of that. He's got a lot of experience in the paranormal. And just a reminder, whatever podcast app you're at, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Visit us on the website, sign up for the newsletter, and really looking forward to the next episode. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in.